Hello and welcome to Obscure Movie Reviews, where we love to take a look at some of the more unknown and ambiguous titles in cinema history. Here we focus on movies that are hard to find, on the older side, relatively unknown, or perhaps they simply lack in popularity. So get your lawyers and roll the dice as we examine a marital mess in Let's Make It Legal. When married couple Hugh and Miriam Halsworth come upon the last day of their legal nuptials, Hugh attempts to convince Miriam to reconsider their divorce. But when Victor McFarland, a rich political figure and Hugh's old rival for Miriam's heart, comes back into town, things get complicated quickly. This 1951 comedy dealt with the issues of divorce and the seriousness of marriage vows in an era where divorce wasn't at all common. So does that make it unrelatable to a modern audience? Let's see. The film stars the lovely Claudette Colbert as Miriam, who is a no-nonsense woman who can't wait for her divorce to finalize. This marks the beginning of her last big run of films, as she mostly retired in the 1960s, only making a few appearances here and there. It's hard to believe that she's nearly 10 years older than both of her co-stars MacDonald Carey and Zachary Scott, as she certainly doesn't look it. Carey plays her former husband Hugh, himself an accomplished actor with a full resume even before doing this film. Carey would go on to finish out his career as a regular on the long-running television series Days of Our Lives. Zachary Scott, too, would go on to work almost exclusively in television after this film. The cast is rounded out with Barbara Bates as Miriam and Hugh's entitled daughter, and Robert Wagner as their desperate son-in-law who just wants to get his life started. Finally, Marilyn Monroe herself makes an appearance as Joyce, a young woman trying desperately to get herself hitched to a wealthy man. The cast does a great job, especially the supporting cast. Just listening to Wagner and Bates argue back and forth almost brings me to tears every time I hear it. Colbert does a good job spearheading the crew, though her character comes off as someone suffering from mood swings at times. She's laughing one minute and furious the next, but it never comes off as unjustified, which is a testament to her performance. Overall, this crew will get an 8 out of 10 for having some really good acting. This film's only an hour and 17 minutes long, and it wastes no time introducing the characters, establishing the conflict, and moving the plot forward. The laughs come at the appropriate times, and the movie never forgets that it's a comedy. That's not to say that the entire film is just a moment of levity. There surely are serious moments as well. It doesn't ever drag or feel like it's wasting time. The ending comes at the appropriate time, and nothing is left to linger for too long. Let's Make It Legal is quite honestly a perfectly paced film. That's why it'll get a 10 out of 10 for having excellent pacing. Cinematographer Lucien Ballard, more famous for gritty dramas like The Wild Bunch and True Grit, lends his talent to this film in a more subdued way. He still holds to his beautiful moving shots while keeping a good eye on the lovely backgrounds. He manages to do this with both exterior and interior shots, which is quite difficult. You're never going to forget that the world is larger than the characters we're watching, but you never lose sight of the characters either. It's hard to find a cinematographer that makes such good use of space. It's truly masterfully photographed, though still not Ballard's best work by a long shot, so we're going to award it a 9 out of 10 for being truly beautiful to watch. The soundtrack is a great example of what could be done in the 1950s.
I just want you to know that I think you're the lowest, vilest, most horrible creature in the whole world.
What?
And furthermore, I'm going to tear out every one of your rose bushes with my bare hands and leave them here to wither and die.
And existing copies of the movie still get the proper treatment of re-recording quality. The dialogue is all crisp and clear, the room ambiance feels real and not inserted later, a common technique done in modern films.
Happy?
I don't know what's come over me. I feel like a different woman.
I told you I'd get you out of the ruts.
And the music by Cyril Mockridge is spot on for the feel of the movie. In fact, the film often uses sound as a plot device. If you ever hear a random sound, be it a phone ringing, background noise, or even noise that drowns out dialogue, rest assured that it's all important. That will give this film an 8 out of 10 for having a really good soundtrack. The plot revolves around a few key players. Of course, there's Miriam and Hugh, recently divorced. While on the surface, they seem to actually have quite a lot of affection for each other, there is one looming issue: Hugh's gambling habit. It isn't like a typical habit either. Rather than having squandered his family's money on his habit, he actually is a rather good gambler. The issue Miriam has is that he simply won't give it up, and she feels that he cares more about it than he cares about her. Victor re-entering the picture after having been gone for many years adds a new level of complication. Miriam might just have easily started a romance with Victor instead of Hugh, but without explanation, Victor had run off. Whenever she asks about it, he continues to dodge the question.
It's almost as if you'd never been away.
I never should have gone.
Which reminds me, you've never told me
I'll
why.
tell you, but not tonight. We're having too much fun.
Rounding out the story is Miriam's daughter, Barbara, and son-in-law, Jerry. Jerry is desperate to get out of Miriam's house and get their life started, but Barbara has been milking her mother's kind heart for all it's worth. The plot has a few well-timed maneuvers and is a pretty good story in general. The ending has a nice twist that'll leave the audience smiling, and despite the struggle to get there, ends on a positive note. While stories about divorced people are all too common now, it was quite a novelty at this time. That's why it'll get a 7 out of 10 for having a good story. While you won't learn anything new on a second watch, like most comedies, it's very enjoyable the next time around. It's heartfelt and funny, and if you have friends not very familiar with older films and are looking for a good place to start, I've often used this one to introduce them, which means I've watched it many times and haven't gotten bored of it yet. Therefore, it'll get a 7 out of 10 for having good rewatchability. Now, this is where it gets a little strange. I've been praising this film basically since the start, but it isn't one of my favorites by far. If you're looking for Claudette Colbert films, there are certainly better ones, and despite much of the promotional material showing off Marilyn Monroe, she's hardly in the movie, and certainly has made better films herself. There are better comedies in the same era, and better romances as well, yet this movie is really quite charming, and despite not being the best of its type or time, I still rate it an 8 out of 10 because it's just so good. That brings Let's Make It Legal to a whopping 8.14 out of 10, landing it firmly as a really good movie. Thanks everyone for watching that obscure movie review. If you have other obscure movies that you'd like us to take a look at, feel free to comment down below. Also, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you can keep up to date on all of our latest content. Content just like this.